Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. What's happening? I am Hatman, your host. We're doing a live stream here to talk about some boxing news. But before we can do that, if I may politely request that you put a like on the video, it really helps these streams get seen. We've got 70 concurrent viewers at the moment. So if we can get at least a few more likes, in fact, it says 80 concurrent viewers. So if we can get 40 likes, we got 36 likes so far. 4 more likes and we'll start. Okay, there we go. I always want to keep the likes at least half the number of concurrent viewers. Okay, so what's first on the agenda here? Before I get to addressing any questions and comments in the chat. In fact, there was a couple of questions, or a couple of comments, should I say, in the chat that kind of irritate me. People saying, put the spliff down. I don't smoke. It's hard for me to put a spliff down when I don't actually smoke. I don't smoke and I don't drink. There you go. Anyway, all that aside, let's get into some boxing talk here. So the first thing I want to address is, and shout out to everybody in the live chat. The first thing I want to address here is Ben Whittaker. So we all saw what happened with his fight on the weekend. And since then, some information has come out about Ben Whittaker when he was leaving Saudi Arabia at the airport. He got into an altercation with a fan. As you can see here from the headline, it says, boxer phone fight. Brit boxer Ben Whittaker smashes fan's phone at airport and is hauled away by security hours after bizarre end to fight. And there's some details here. You can see it says, a witness who was at the fight and booked on the same Saudi Airlines flight to Heathrow said he was in duty free when he saw the confrontation. He told The Sun, I spotted Whittaker coming through security, and then a fan who had a boxing t-shirt on went up with his phone and went to take a photo. The witness, who did not wish to be named, said airport security detained the pair. He added that both men, with the fan aged around 30 wearing merchandise from the fight, initially had their passports taken off them. Ben said he would pay for the phone and they were allowed to go on the flight. The witness said, strangely, the pair were taken into a nearby coffee shop and wrote down their details while sitting side by side at the same table. They parted on good terms. They literally did it at the Starbucks, at the Costa or Starbucks in front of everyone. But here's the crucial bit. Right? Look what it says here. When he went to the fan, he sort of forgot that he had no problem running up to him. His face was lumpy and bruised from the fight. So let me repeat that quote. The witness said, when he went to the fan, he sort of forgot and he had no problem running up to him. His face was lumpy and bruised from the fight. As in, sort of forgot that he had an ankle injury, allegedly. He said Whittaker was fuming at first, but then calmed down once security were involved, as you would expect. He looked quite chill towards the end. And so, yeah, Ben Whittaker, there is a photo of it, which I don't have here, but you can find it easily online. Many of the newspapers have published it, of the fan's smashed phone. And also Ben Whittaker at the airport with his ankles strapped up. But again, according to this guy, when he went to the fan, he sort of forgot and had no problem running up to him. Forgot about his limp. That's according to this guy. I weren't there. I didn't see it. But this is what a witness is saying. And then we've got this. Ben Whittaker's exact injuries revealed after he crashed out of the ring. and left fighting a wheelchair. So 27-year-old promoter Ben Shalom last night told Sky Sports, following the unprecedented incident that ended the match on Saturday night, Ben Whittaker is undergoing further assessments on his neck as a previous injury was aggravated by the fall. He also experienced an ankle sprain and will begin a rehab process as soon as he is cleared by doctors and is determined to be back in the ring as soon as possible. What do you guys think of the Ben Whittaker situation? As I say, if it's a genuine injury and he can provide proof of it, then I'm willing to change my initial thought, because my initial thought was he's play acting. I don't know for certain. I could be wrong. But, you know, in absence of some actual scans or something like that to prove that he had an injury that would rule him out so he couldn't continue fighting, then I'm going to remain suspicious. It is what it is. What do you guys think? Did Ben Whittaker pull a fast one? Or was he genuinely injured? King KO says, Ben Whittaker has lost his mind. All right, somebody here saying, are you watching a TNT show? I think Tommy Fletcher is behind with a round to go. I'm not watching it. Hopefully they upload the fight on YouTube thereafter. But yeah, it seems most people are unconvinced by Ben Whittaker's injury. Shout out to Charles B in the chat. Shout out to everybody in the chat. And you know, one thing I was a bit surprised by is how popular Ben Whittaker is. I mean, I knew he was popular, but what I'm saying is when I uploaded my post-fight video several days after the fight, it got loads of views. You know, way more than the Fabio Wardley, Fraser Clark video, way more than any of that. So Ben Whittaker clearly has some level of popularity, at least in the UK. Maybe internationally, his promoter Ben Shalom says he's massive in America. So, yeah, he's definitely got a growing fan base. Oh, wow. Albie Reynolds says Tommy Fletcher just lost the decision, 79-73. Goozy says, Ben Shalom said he has a pre-existing neck injury. Yeah, that's what it says on the screen there. You can see the quote from Ben Shalom. Claims he has a pre-existing neck injury. But I didn't see him holding his neck. Did you guys see him holding his neck when he fell out of the ring? I didn't see that. I saw him acting like his foot was injured. So not sure what's going on there. Yeah, nobody buying what Ben Whittaker is selling. Can we get a few more likes in here, people? There's 189 concurrent viewers. If we can get at least 90 likes. We're on 67. Let's get the likes up a little bit. Much appreciated. And then we will continue. Let's get those likes up. 90 likes. Nearly there, 74. 16 more. Yeah, a couple more likes and we will continue. Three more likes. And I'll get to more of your questions. Thank you. 3 more likes. Can we get 3 more likes? There we go. All right, so let's move on to the next story here on the agenda. Next bit of news. Ben Shalom Glovegate. You guys up to speed on this? So Ben Shalom did this interview yesterday on a small YouTube channel called Sportsman Boxing, right? You can see it on screen there. But this channel, I think, is associated maybe with Ben Shalom. I don't know that for certain, but I'm just judging it based on actually watching this video, because they've hit the ground running as far as their production value. And that's when you know that a channel is being sponsored by somebody with money, right? From day one, when they've got already sponsorships on the channel and the production value is really high. Normally that means that there's somebody big behind them. Anyway, he did an interview with this channel here, and in the video, he said that during fight week, in the run-up to Wardley Clark 2, Fraser Clark's team expressed concerns about Fabio Wardley's gloves. And, you know, he says, as in Ben Shalom, that he has forwarded these concerns to the British Boxing Board of Control. All right. And the gloves that Fabio Wardley was wearing are Fly gloves. Fly is a UK company that make, could I call them luxury gloves? They're kind of high-end gloves, but I'll come on to that in just a second. So yeah, Ben Shalom has raised concerns, or he said that Fraser Clark's team raised concerns. And obviously as Fraser Clark's promoter, he has to take that up and then try to do something about it or get it looked into. And he's done several other interviews where he's said the same thing, even post-fight, okay? Frank Warren then went on TalkSport earlier on today, and he was tearing into Ben Shalom, as he has been over various things over the past couple weeks. And he threatened to sue Ben Shalom. He said that the comments Ben Shalom is making about the gloves are defamatory comments, or however he described them, libelous. And so, yeah, he's threatening to sue Ben Shalom over those quote-unquote accusations. I mean, Frank Warren is so quick to try and sue people. It's unbelievable. Or threatening to sue people. It's incredible. And he's been like this for a very, very long time. That's why back in the days, the British media used to call him Frank the Writ, because he was serving so many writs, even on, you know, against newspapers or journalists or whatever. It got totally out of control from their perspective, and they started calling him Frank the Writ. So yeah, Frank Warren went on TalkSport, threatened to sue Ben Shalom for the comments about the gloves. He says there's no investigation going on. How can Ben Shalom investigate anything because he doesn't have access to the gloves? Well, from what I heard Ben Shalom say, he said that, again, he seemed to indicate that he'd spoken to the British Boxing Board of Control and raised the concerns that Fraser Clark's team had with the gloves with them. Now, just to be clear here, issues over gloves are extremely commonplace in boxing. It's not a strange thing to have one fighter's team unhappy with the other fighter's gloves. It happens literally all the time. Now, sometimes what the fighter's team who complain about the other guy's gloves are actually doing is trying to disrupt or trying to play mind games, basically. In many cases, they know there's nothing wrong with the opponent's gloves, but they just want to try and get a psychological edge, get under his skin, so on and so forth. Yeah, so a lot of the time, that's all it's really about, is just trying to get a psychological edge. But in some instances, of course, there is a genuine grievance there. I mean, if we go back many years, Floyd Mayweather, when he fought Marcus Maidana the first time, he didn't allow Maidana to wear Everlast MX, which are horsehair gloves. He said there was not enough padding in the gloves, and Maidana was forced to change his gloves, which he'd been wearing for several fights and really liked them. He was forced to change his gloves to Everlast. I think it was Everlast Powerlocks or some other type of more protective glove. And I say protective glove that has more padding. You can't really feel the knuckles through the glove. So that's just an example. Even though those gloves were approved by whatever commission was overseeing that fight, Mayweather said, look, if you don't change the gloves, the fight's not going ahead. Right, so that kind of thing is commonplace. It's not an unusual occurrence at all. And as you can see here, Ben Shalom, after Frank Warren threatened to sue him, saying, why don't you look at what I actually said? It says here, Frank Warren needs to relax, so on and so forth. You get the gist. Now, with regards to fly gloves, I've tried several pairs of fly gloves and I've never really liked them myself. And one of the unusual things I found about fly gloves is that they are extremely soft. I mean, they might be the softest pair of boxing gloves I've ever worn. Now, when I say soft, I'm not so much talking about the foam, although the foam is very soft as well, but there are many gloves with similar density foam to the fly gloves that I've tried. When I say soft, I'm talking more about the leather. Okay, now the leather on fly gloves is extremely high grade premium leather. But whenever I've tried those gloves on, I've always thought this leather might be nice quality for Rolls-Royce car seats, because apparently that's what they use it for. It might be nice for that and it might be appropriate for that. But is it really the appropriate type of leather for boxing gloves? Because it's so soft, in my head, I'm thinking this leather won't really hold the structure of the glove very well. You know, and if you, certainly the fly gloves I've tried, if you bend the fly glove, you can literally crumple the whole glove up when it's brand new, almost into a small ball. Yeah, that's how that's how soft the structure of the glove is. So, you know, they don't really offer much support, the gloves I've tried. And I always wondered whether that would be an issue, the lack of structure of fly gloves. So after I'd ever tried fly gloves on, and I never really liked, I don't like the shape and the ergonomics of them either. But you guys may remember this. Can you see this on screen here? Again, I've got no idea whether or not the gloves that Fabio Wardley used had any issues with them. Obviously, I've got no access to them, so I can't confirm or deny any issues with those gloves. No idea. But what I can say is the WBC had an issue with fly gloves in 2021. You see the headline on screen? Fly boxing gloves hit by WBC ruling. Companies stoutly defend their brand. Now, let's look at this here. Confusion surrounds the potential status of the Confusion surrounds the potential status of the Fly brand of boxing gloves after the WBC stated that the brand are not to be worn in any contest sanctioned by the governing body due to safety concerns. In an email sent to various national and local boxing commissions, as well as various managers and promoters on July 14, a copy of which has been seen by Boxing Social, WBC President Mauricio Sulaiman stated, as a matter of primary safety priority, until further consultations, the brand Fly of boxing gloves are not to be worn in any World Boxing Council boxing match. There is a delicate report which we are attaching to this communication, which shows extreme defects which can result of great danger to the combatants. We need to determine whether the gloves used in the bouts described below were individually defective or there is a specific design issue which must be rectified immediately before the glove could be reauthorized, only following detailed consultation. The considerable wear and shape change and immunization of padding, which occurred radically, changed their shape. It is a matter of great concern and gravity, as well as the lack of support those particular gloves offered, causing considerable pain and injury to the hands. Also, their rapid fading, discoloration during the bout. The World Boxing Council has worked hand in hand with a number of glove specialists and manufacturers, insisting on the highest overall quality and integrity of design across the spectrum, with safety as the number one consideration. The very present and future health of boxers is at stake. And it says here, Suleiman's email includes a report and images relating to a May 21 bridgeweight elimination contest between Evgeny Romanov and Dmitry Kudryashov for the WBC silver belt, in which both boxers wore Fly KYO 10-ounce gloves. Ahead of the report, Solomon states, "We would like all of you to please carefully and fully read the account below and look at the photos which graphically as well as starkly illustrate the problem at hand." It's something, I'm struggling here a bit with this very bad grammar. All right? It's obviously written by Mauricio Suleiman or some other Spanish-speaking person who doesn't speak English as their first language. Anyway, it says, it's something something which must be rectified without delay. The WBC will never accept second best in this matter. Part of the report referred to by Suleiman, which is included in the email below, reads as follows. The gloves after the fight of both fighters have had a very bad condition and could be easily rolled. The padding looked as if it didn't hold the form of the gloves. The paint was worn off the gloves. After the fight, Romanov had a suspicious to have a broken arm, but x-rays didn't show it. Romanov says that never in his life had he such pain without having a broken arm. According to the comments of the boxers, the gloves didn't protect the arms. The amount of horsehair and synthetic material were not sufficient for this goal. All right. So those are the words of Mauricio Suleiman. That was the report from the WBC. Again, this was back in 2021. And the WBC basically banned Fly gloves for a while from being worn in their contests that they oversaw or sanctioned. So there has been concerns in the past with Fly gloves, not just from Mauricio Suleiman. I'm going to show you another example here. This is Russ Anbar. This was an interview he did 5 years ago following the Dillian Whyte-Oscar Rivas fight. You guys may remember. And he raised concerns about the gloves that Dillian Whyte was wearing, which were also Fly gloves. How many of you guys remember this? Fly gloves having some issues, allegedly, right? This has been something that is not new. Various people over the years have raised concerns, such as Russ Anbar, such as the WBC, who banned them for a time. I'm not certain, but I think the WBC now allow Fly gloves in their contests, so maybe they updated their designs and, you know, their various models of gloves. But yeah, when Fly first launched as a brand, their whole ethos seemed to be about using homegrown high-level materials. Homegrown as it's a British brand, so getting, the finest leather from Scotland and this, that, and the other, right? It's all about homegrown. But again, just because a certain type of leather is nice for Rolls-Royce car seats, it doesn't necessarily mean that that leather is going to work well on boxing gloves. And whenever I tried Fly gloves on, that was my feeling. The leather was like too loose or something. It wasn't tight enough to the glove, to the foam underneath the glove. So whether that type of leather is appropriate, yeah, I'm not sold on it personally. Now, that's to take nothing away from Fabio Wardley, I'm not saying that there was anything wrong with his gloves in the Fraser Clark fight. I got no idea. Never had any access to those gloves. But fly gloves in general, there have been some complaints about it. Or complaints about them, should I say. All right, moving on to the next story here. Now, this is from the same interview with Ben Shalom that I previously referenced. Ben Shalom made a comment here, which I've heard people claim that Chris Eubank Jr. has made the same comment, but I haven't heard it myself. So I can't confirm that. But certainly in this interview, Ben Shalom said that Conor Benn has served his ban. Now, I don't know whether that was a slip of the tongue, whether that was, him misspeaking or what. But he seemed to suggest that Conor Benn has been serving a silent ban. Now, I know many people have suggested this over the past couple years, but Ben Shalom is somebody in the industry. He's a promoter with a contract with Sky. He obviously promotes Eubank Jr. now. And he made this comment publicly. If that's not true, if Conor Benn hasn't been serving a ban, then surely what Ben Shalom said there might get him in hot water legally. So, yeah, make of that what you will. Is Conor Benn serving a silent ban, or has he served a silent ban? What do you guys think in the chat? Star Fox says, fly gloves are soft enough even for a Premiership footballer's behind. Charles B says, I thought they looked tampered with before the fight. Are you referring to Wardley's gloves? You thought they looked tampered with? Ocean Blue says, I suspect Ben's been given a backdated ban. Possible. But will Conor Benn or Eddie Hearn admit this? Because normally when you have these PED situations, eventually UCAD and or the British board will put out a statement. Yeah, but if it's a silent type ban, then maybe no statement gets put out. But certainly with Tyson Fury, for example, when that issue was eventually resolved, statements were put out. Public statements. Will we get a public statement here or not? Star Fox says he should be banned again for that hairdo. I agree. That slick back was despicable. All right, moving on to the next story here. So, Fabio Wardley, in this interview with Box Nation, has called for a Deontay Wilder fight. Now, I don't hate this fight at all for Fabio Wardley. Some people think, well, Deontay Wilder is past it, he's over the hill, so on and so forth. Yeah, but Fabio Wardley, I think, still needs a few more incremental steps. I mean, he said in this interview that if a big fight against whoever, one of the champions or one of the top contenders, one of the big names, should I say, was offered to him, he'd take it right now. But he himself admits that he'd be better off with a few more intermediate steps before taking on one of the really, I say big names. Wilder's a big name, but I'm talking about guys who were still there or thereabouts in terms of their ability. So he says that he would be open to the Wilder fight, and I actually quite like that fight for him. Wilder these days, you know, he's always going to have some level of power, but mentally he seems to have checked out. Tyson Fury definitely stole his soul, you know, took his soul in the third fight in particular, but well, the second and third fights, but particularly the third fight. So it's a fight which, you know, I like for Fabio Wardley. I think he could beat Deontay Wilder. And funny enough, he kind of compared himself to Wilder a little bit, because people talk about Deontay Wilder not really having much skill, but being a massive puncher who can pull it out of the bag. You know, he only has to be right for 1 second. His opponent has to be right for 36 minutes. And Fabio Wardley kind of reiterated that as regards to himself. He said that he only needs to be right for 1 second. And in saying that, he's almost acknowledging that his boxing skills are not exactly the best, although they are improving. He also said that he's definitely developing his boxing ability, and I would agree with that. But it isn't just Fabio Wardley's punching power, because there's plenty of guys out there that can punch. Wilder can still punch. It's Fabio Wardley's spirit. He's got a tremendous, tremendous fighting spirit. And if he didn't have that type of fighting spirit, Dillian Whyte probably never would have signed him to that management deal. So he's got a tremendous fighting spirit. And with a spirit like that and the power he has, he can probably go a fair way. But I expect his technical deficiencies to catch up with him at some stage. Maybe sooner rather than later, depending on who they match him with. People have talked about matching Fabio Wardley against the likes of Kevin Lerena. Kevin Lerena actually is calling for a Wilder fight. He's offered, just like Lawrence Okolie before him, who was WBC Bridgerweight champion. Kevin Lerena has offered Deontay Wilder a fight, a crack at that title. And yeah, Kevin Lerena is being thrown around as a possible opponent for Fabio Wardley. Fabio says that Lorena's actually reached out to him and there is a possibility. And that fight, I guess, makes some type of sense, given the fact that Kevin Lerena managed to drop Daniel Dubois several times when they fought a few years ago. So if Fabio Wardley could go in there and have no issues with Lerena and take him out in more convincing fashion, you know, maybe that would help build his profile even more. Other names that people have thrown out there for Wardley are people like, well, I've thrown out the name Efe Ajagba. I think that's a good fight for him. Ajagba can punch, but he's very limited. So I quite like that fight for Fabio. And, you know, Ajagba also, last I checked, is ranked higher than Fabio in several of the governing bodies. So you're fighting a guy ranked higher than you, you're going to take his ranking if you beat him, right? So that kind of makes sense as well. But people like Filip Hrgović, I don't like that fight for Fabio Wardley at all. I don't like that fight for him whatsoever at this stage. I also don't like the Caballero fight for him. I don't like the Zhang fight for him right now. I don't like the Joseph Parker fight even. I agree with Simon Jordan on that, because Simon Jordan has been saying to pump the brakes a little bit on Fabio Wardley, because going from Fraser Clark to Joseph Parker is a big leap. And it is, in terms of professional experience, know-how, and so on. So yeah, Fabio Wardley calling out Deontay Wilder. A faded big name. I think it makes sense. It would certainly raise his profile even further, particularly in the United States, because a lot of people are getting to know him in the UK because of the Fraser Clark rivalry. But in the United States, if he were to beat a Deontay Wilder, it could be big. Here we've got Fraser Clark's record. He's 18-0-1. So that one draw, obviously, in the first Fraser Clark fight. And actually, I do have the heavyweight rankings there. I forgot I even had them. You can see Fabio Wardley is number 8 with the WBC. Number 9 with the WBA. number 12 with the IBF, number 8 with the WBO. And above him in the WBC, you can see a Jaguar is number 5. So you can snatch that spot if you beat him. In the WBA, you fight somebody like Pulev, he's above him. That's a very winnable fight as far as I'm concerned. Mike Perez, Lania Pero. In the IBF, you got Otto Wallin above him. That's a name some people have mentioned. I reckon that's a decent fight for him. Frank Sanchez possibly, but you know, Sanchez I think is a lot better than the Ajit Caballel fight showed, because the way it looked to me, he was carrying a heavy injury in that fight. But because the Saudis were paying him so much money, he couldn't turn it down. He couldn't afford to turn it down. Do you know what I mean? Especially coming from Cuba, obscure. He isn't really a big name with casuals and whatever. So you can understand why he would take the fight even with an injury. But it appeared to me that he was injured in the Caballel fight. So, you know, Frank Sanchez at his best might actually be too much for Fabio Wardley. But we haven't seen anything of Frank Sanchez, as far as I'm aware anyway, unless I've missed something here, since that loss to Caballel. And with the WBO, Wardley's number 8. Above him, you got AJ Italma. I mean, you can see the Frank Warren influence on these WBO rankings. Italma being above Anthony Joshua, Hrgovic, etc. is a bit absurd. I think Italma is a tremendous talent, but he hasn't done anything as yet to warrant this ranking of number 6. So that is what that is. But I think Justice Hooney could be a good option for Fabio Wardley if he wants to go the WBO route. Take on a Justice Hooney, take his ranking. All right, moving on to the next bit of news here, the next talking point. Andy Lee claims that Tyson Fury did not spar for the Alexander Usyk fight. Now, Andy Lee is saying that this basically affected Tyson Fury's fitness. So he's concurring with what Dominic Ingle was saying, because Dominic Ingle thinks the only reason Tyson Fury lost was because he gassed out. I beg to differ. Tyson Fury was getting hit with big shots in the first 3 rounds. Okay, so I don't know where this gassing out thing comes from. Yeah, he did gas out, of course, later on, and things got worse for him at that point. But early on in the fight, he was being caught with big shots when he was fully fresh. So to blame it all on him just not being fit enough, I think is ridiculous. Okay? And I'm referring now to what Dominic Ingle said. Andy Lee says that the sparring affected him with regards to the fitness, and presumably he's also inferring that the lack of sparring affected him in terms of his timing and sharpness. But I don't think he actually said that. I'd have to go back and watch the video, but you know, lots of fighters, believe it or not, have gone into big fights over the years without doing any sparring. Most famously, Joe Calzaghe used to do barely any sparring in the latter stages of his career because he had hand trouble. And when he fought Jeff Lacey, which is a really underrated win, by the way. I know people say Jeff Lacey's rubbish now, but at the time, Jeff Lacey was like unified champion. It had a few defenses, and he was knocking people out. Joe Calzaghe ruined him. Joe Calzaghe put him on the scrap heap. And yeah, for that fight, Joe Calzaghe apparently did no sparring at all because his hands just couldn't take it, or very little sparring. So fighters in the past have gone into big fights without doing any sparring and still won. Obviously, you're dealing with exceptional talents. Styles make fights, so on and so forth. And Calzaghe did certain things to compensate, or to try and compensate, for the lack of sparring. But with Tyson Fury, what we have to remember here is that he did 2 camps for Usyk. So during the first camp where he got the cut, he was doing loads of sparring. Yeah? And then he had a few weeks rest, right, after that pullout, which was only 2 weeks prior to the original scheduled date for the Usyk fight. So he had a little rest of whatever, a month, and then he went back into training camp. So it's not like a guy who only fights twice a year and, you know, his last fight was 6 months ago and he didn't do any sparring for a particular fight. No, with Tyson Fury, he had 2 camps. One camp, he did loads of sparring. Then he had a little break. Then the next camp, supposedly, he didn't do any sparring. But the sharpness from the previous camp would have been there. That's the point I'm making. So, yeah, I'm not too sure about this idea that the lack of sparring would have been the difference between winning and losing. I mean, it can, obviously, in some cases. But in Tyson Fury's case, I think he would have retained a lot of the sharpness from the first camp, because it's not like they were very far apart, the 2 camps. And even if you can't do head sparring or whatever, you can still do body sparring. You know, put a head guard on and do a bunch of body sport. You can still do that. They used to do a lot of that in the Ingle gym. So, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. But, you know, the Fury camp will tell themselves whatever they have to tell themselves in order to be confident going into a rematch if it takes place. All right, moving on to the next item here on the agenda. Jarrell Miller says it looks like Derek Chisora in Manchester in January. That fight is apparently being negotiated behind the scenes. I've seen some people say the fight is signed. I haven't found any information that it's signed. And certainly what Jarrell Miller says here, look, I'm not privy to all the information. I might not have seen all the information that's out there. But based upon the information I've seen, I haven't seen anything to say that it's signed. So Jarrell Miller told Boxing Scene, that's the biggest one we're talking about right now, Chisora. It's not locked in yet. The deal's not signed, but there are definitely talks. Goes on to say, we're going to see. We don't have the arena locked down yet, but it's looking like Manchester in January. I love it. I think it's a great fight. I don't think it's an easy one, but I think it's a win. I've got to go in there and beat my boy up. You might hear about it real soon, but the contract's not signed yet. All right, so that's Chisora Miller. Personally, I think it's a surprising fight for Derek Chisora to take at this stage in his career. He's only got 2 fights, according to him, left. This one and then his swan song, he wants to be in Zimbabwe. Miller's coming off a good win against Andy Ruiz. You got to figure that Ruiz is a fresher fighter than Chisora. He's certainly faster. Does Chisora hit harder maybe than Ruiz? Possibly. I would favor Jarrell Miller in the fight heavily. But if Chisora pulled it off, it wouldn't be the first time, obviously, that he has proved me wrong. I've written this guy off many times in the past, and he has, gone on to pull out victories that I didn't expect him to get. So, that's testament to the warrior that Derek Chisora is, his unbreakable spirit. So let's see if he can do the same against Jarrell Miller if this fight actually goes ahead. What do you guys think in the chat about Derek Chisora versus Jarrell Miller? Oh, excuse me. Thank you for the correction in the chat there. Yeah, the Miller-Ruiz fight was a draw. That's right. Thank you for the correction. It was a draw. It was a draw that most people thought should have been a win for Miller. All right, Black Dynamite in the house. Shout out to you, sir. Callum McIntyre says, why do British trainers seem to have an obsession with Fury? Completely idolize the guy. I've been wondering that for years. They do. You got people like Joe Gallagher, you got people like Dominic Ingle, and various other trainers who have this obsession with Tyson Fury. It is a strange thing. Because I've never seen him obsess about any other UK fighter in this way. But when it comes to Tyson, they just totally obsess about the guy. Billy Nelson, yes, he's another one. Thank you, Sosa. Billy Nelson's another one who obsesses about Tyson Fury all the time. Very, very strange. Our Q&A says, Hat My Man, is that your normal voice or is it your YouTube content voice? Well, I'm speaking to you right now. So it must be my normal voice, right? This is how I talk. But my voice does get a bit hoarse from time to time because I do a lot of talking. So if you catch me at a different time of the day, my voice might be a bit smoother than this, but yeah, especially towards the end of the day when I've been talking all day, it can get a bit hoarse. Oh, okay. OA says, you know, some TV presenters have got an anchor voice. Yeah, my anchor voice is more in my pre-recorded videos. That's when I try to speak more clearly and, you know, I'm a bit more relaxed on these live streams, so I'm not really doing my anchor voice. But in the pre-recorded videos, that's more like an anchor voice. Whereas the live streams, I'm a bit more casual with it. Shout out to Nathan. He says, yes, Hatman tuning in from Dubai, moved here from the UK 2 years ago. Best move ever. Yeah, I used to live out there myself. It is a different world. The quality of life, certainly when I was living out there, was very, very high. Very, very high. And in Qatar as well. There was somebody actually early on in the chat who started putting up a bunch of Qatari flags. But I also lived there. And yeah, the quality of life in Qatar, extremely high. I think Qatar per capita is the richest country in the world. Last time I checked. Distrager says, Miller definitely gasses out. Did he gas out in the Andy Ruiz fight? Not really. It was more Ruiz who gassed out. Obviously, Ruiz had a very bad hand injury, which he showed after the fight. I mean, his hand looked all sorts of messed up. Nathan says, I do business in Saudi, so travel there for work. It is the future, I'm telling you. Goozy says, only good if you have the money. Well, when I was living in the Middle East, it was actually quite cheap. I mean, a lot cheaper than London. I'm sure it's more expensive now because I was living out there over a decade ago, before it was really trendy with Westerners, you know, as trendy as it is now. But when I was living out there, you know, certain things, it depends where you live in Dubai, but it was cheaper than London. And one of the things that you have to factor in is there's no income tax, okay? Also, the fact that fuel is ridiculously cheap. Now, it varies from Gulf state to Gulf state. As far as I'm aware, the cheapest petrol is in Saudi Arabia. Their petrol is just unbelievably cheap. But in Qatar, it was something like, when I was out there in Qatar, and by the way, the Arabs at the time were complaining that the government in one of those Arab countries had put the fuel price up from about 15p, the equivalent of 15p a litre. They put it up to like 20. And that was the first time they'd raised the price in 33 years. And the Arabs were all complaining. That's how good they've got it in terms of how cheap it is to drive. That's why so many of them drive these massive SUVs. Shout out to Charles B. Thank you for the super chat, sir. Appreciate the support. Much love. But yeah, the cost of petrol out there is ridiculously cheap. That's something you have to factor into the price of living out there. It's not as expensive as you might think. Ocean Blue says, I like the Middle East, but Dubai is too urban for me. And for me too, to be honest now. You know, it's become a lot more, even more developed than when I was living there. I liked it when Dubai was flying under the radar a little bit with young Western people. Now it's a bit too young and urban and, you know, stunting and fronting and all that kind of stuff going on out there. But when I was living out there, I loved it. I thought it was great. You know, the quality of life was excellent. Somebody said that the weather's too hot for them. Yeah, the weather's going to be too hot for some people. But they do have winter out there. And winter is relatively mild, believe it or not. It's not hot there in December in the Middle East. It's quite cool. It's maybe, I don't know, it might get down as low as 11 degrees Celsius. Oh yeah, it'll get that low, even in the daytime. Certain times of year. But more commonly, you know, from let's say 15 to maybe 20 degrees Celsius in their winter time. So it does get quite mild. Charles B says, have you ever been to Japan? I've never been to Japan, no. I may go there one day. They've got a lot of interesting things about their culture, a lot to see. Although in Japan, they're becoming kind of hostile towards tourists. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. But in Japan, they're starting to have a go at tourists. They say that the tourists are dropping litter, this, that, and the other. And the tourists also are disrespecting the culture. Nathan says Ignatius is serious. That fight's tomorrow, right? Franklin Ignatius versus Jamie TKV. Troll Beta says they are mostly talking about Chinese tourists. No, they're talking about Western tourists as well. I don't know whether it's mostly Chinese or mostly Western, but there's been a lot of complaints about Western tourists in Japan. There's a particular part of Japan where they still have geishas walking around, and a lot of Westerners go there and they want to take pictures of the geishas walking around in the street. And yeah, apparently the locals don't like it. So they've actually banned tourists from certain areas now, or banned people taking pictures, should I say, in certain areas. So they can be a bit funny, as I understand, because I've watched many videos of Westerners who live in Japan, and they have said, it's not me, they're the ones saying that the Japanese can be a bit funny with tourists. You know, especially the Japanese media. And also, a lot of Japanese people don't speak English. So it's not necessarily the easiest place to go for someone that speaks English, you know, someone who doesn't speak Japanese. Japan is not westernized, at least not as far as their language. They really don't speak English like that, most people out there. Shout out to G-Man in the chat. Star Fox says, imagine Japanese people banning people who take pictures. The irony. The irony. Yeah, it's crazy. But there's been a bunch of influencers as well. Western influencers who have got themselves in trouble in Japan doing silly stuff. One of them, I think, was an Italian guy, I think. And the other one was a Somali guy, but he's some type of European national. Yeah, one of them, I'm sure, was an Italian guy and the other Somali. And they got themselves in trouble in Japan for doing pranks in order to get views on their TikTok or Instagram or whatever. Logan Paul, oh yeah, he was one way back in the days. Yeah, Logan Paul went to that forest and, well, I'm not even going to repeat what he did. But yeah, Logan Paul got in trouble. G-Man says, one thing I wouldn't like about Japan is their muscle culture. They love all that. Oh, muzzle. I guess you mean muzzle culture. Yeah. Muzzle culture. Yes. Weird. All right, let's get back to the boxing talk here. We've got a few more things to discuss. So in this interview here, Denzel Bentley called for the Hamza Shiraz fight. Now, he called for this fight several years ago, but obviously Denzel Bentley's had his ups and downs. He lost to Felix Cash, which was a really bad loss. He also lost to Nathan Heaney. So I'm not going to say that Hamza Shiraz has ever ducked Denzel Bentley, because Denzel Bentley hasn't always been in the running. But he's put together a couple of wins now. And I want to say he gave Janabek Aleem Kanuli his toughest fight to date. And so if you're looking for an intermediate step between where Hamza Shiraz is now and fighting Aleem Kanuli, Denzel Bentley might not be a bad shout. They're both Queensbury fighters. It's an easy fight to make. So that is what that is. And Gareth A. Davis basically suggests that if Hamza Shiraz doesn't fight Denzel Bentley before fighting for a world title, that's a duck. Don't know how many of you guys agree with that, but that's what Gareth A. Davis is saying. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a duck because Hamza Shiraz is past Denzel Bentley. You know, how do you duck somebody who isn't a mandatory for any of your belts and who's below you in the rankings? I'm not sure how you can call that a duck, but I think it will be a good fight for him if he wants a step. Even if Hamza Shiraz, let's say, fights Carlos Adames. And I'm not saying that fight is a foregone conclusion, by the way. But if Hamza Shiraz was able to beat Adames, a first defense for him against Denzel Bentley might actually make sense. You know, see how he deals with Bentley compared to how Aleem Kanuli dealt with Bentley. Because, again, that Aleem Kanuli-Bentley fight was competitive. Aleem Kanuli won it, no doubt. But Denzel Bentley had his moments. He had more than his fair share of moments. And Aleem Kanuli at no point looked like he was going to stop him. At no point. So here we have Hamza Shiraz's BoxRec page, 21-0, 17 KOs. Denzel Bentley is 23-1 with 17 KOs as well. Bentley can punch, but I've always felt that his punch resistance is a little, I don't want to say bad, but mediocre. That's how it appears to me anyway. And Hamza Shiraz can really punch. I mean, they can both punch. But Hamza Shiraz to me seems the fresher of the two. And I think he's got a higher ceiling. These are the current middleweight rankings. You can see the champions there. You got Carlos Adames, WBC champion. Erislandy Lara, WBA. Janabek Alim Kanuli has the IBF and WBO. Shiraz is number 1 with the WBC. You got Chris Eubank Jr. at number 3. I've highlighted Eubank Jr. there as well because that's another potential fight for Hamza Shiraz if he can get his name big enough to make that fight attractive for Eubank Jr. And that would mean picking up at least one belt, maybe a couple of belts, because as it stands right now, Eubank Jr. don't want to go anywhere near Hamza Shiraz. So you got Shiraz number 1 with WBC, Eubank Jr. number 3. With WBA, Shiraz is number 6, Eubank Jr. number 7 below him. With the IBF, you got Shiraz at number 4, Eubank Jr. number 5. It's interesting how close they are in most of the rankings. And then with the WBO, who remember, Frank Warren's always been very close to, Eubank Jr. is not rated by them at all. I'm not saying that's because of Frank Warren. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But Hamza Shiraz is number 1 with the WBO, and Denzel Bentley, another Frank Warren fighter, is number 2. Why does that not surprise me? So Shiraz could go for the Alim Kanuli fight, or he could go for Carlos Adames. I suspect he'll go for Adames because I think Adames is a more winnable fight for him. So that's the route he'll probably take. If he can beat him, pick up the WBC title, don't be surprised if Denzel Bentley is his first defense. Maybe Denzel Bentley will get his wish in that scenario. All right, let's get to some of your comments here. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Charles B says Bentley can punch. He certainly can. G-Man says that Cash win is strange. Cash looked bang average before, then amazing in one fight, and beyond that, indeed, I agree with that, yeah. It is strange. And again, Charles B, I know what you're alluding to, Charles B. He was part of that Sims gym. And ever since he left that Sims gym, but then again, as G-Man said, wasn't he with Sims prior to the Bentley fight as well? But was still looking kind of average prior to the Bentley fight. But I don't know. From what I remember, he was looking okay prior to the Bentley fight. But then he looked spectacular against Bentley. And then since then, he's looked terrible. Yeah, middleweight, as Charles B says, is definitely a weak weight class, for sure. I think Waffles are great, says Hatman, some thoughts on some of these big boxing channels like BKM getting from 0 to 1 million in 3 years. Must be buying subs. I don't know, but it is surprising that that particular channel has gained that many subs so quickly. Maybe people really like their content, you know? Could just be people really like the content. I don't know if they're buying subs, no idea. But when you compare them to equivalent channels who have been around much longer, like Seconds Out, IFL, Boxing Social, they've got more subscribers than all those channels who have been around for a very long time. So, I don't know. Do people really like Boxing King Media, Boxing King Media content? Casa Calling said, I'm banned in the chat. Are you? I can see your comment. You can't be banned. Rayman says, I'm a fan of Joshua and I don't have any explanation for why he lost to Dubois. It's boxing, it happens. But these people out here, butt kissing a guy in Fury that hasn't done anything in his comeback. Sosa says, Adam Azima, Horror Davis. In fact, have I got any Adam Azima, Horror Davis stuff up here? Nah, I forgot to, but I did mean to talk about Adam Azima, Horror Davis because there's a few fights on that card that, could be potentially interesting. Let me just get it up here. In fact, I can put the graphics on screen. Let me see. Give me a second. Okay, so this show tomorrow, boxer show, you got Michael McKinson fighting on there against some South African guy who I don't know. Adam Azima, Horror Davis, obviously. You got Dan Aziz against Louis Edmondson. I'm not too familiar with Louis Edmondson, but he's 9-0. And if they're putting him in against Dan Aziz at this stage of his career, he must have been some type of amateur talent. Anthony Yard against, yeah, we'll come to who Anthony Yard is fighting. And then you've got, a few other people there. Jamie TKV against Franklin Ignatius. So first of all, Adam Azim versus O'Hara Davis. In my mind, this is an interesting fight only because Azim has never been in with a puncher before, and Ohara Davis can really punch. So it's a question of whether he can land, and if he does land, what happens? I think most people are right to strongly favor Adam Azim. He's the younger guy, the fresher guy, and the more talented guy, quite frankly. More athletically gifted, faster, and so on. So this is a fight that he should win, but again, you don't know what happens if he gets hit on the chin. And if Ohara Davis can get that right hand off, then we might see something, we might see an upset. We shall see. Also on the card, you got Anthony Yarde taking on, in fact, we've got the graphics wrong here. Where's the graphic I'm looking for? Yeah, this guy. This is who Anthony Yarde's fighting. Now, the guy is 17-1, only 7 KOs. So he doesn't have a record that suggests he's a prolific puncher. And this is really typical Anthony Yarde fare. Right, in between fighting the top guys in the division, he tends to drop right back down in many instances and fight put-ins. This guy might not have on paper a put-ins record in terms of the digits, but if you scroll through his record, you'll see that he's fought nobody. 17-1 from Latvia, 7 KOs. Can he do anything against Anthony Yarde in this? I think it's a 10-rounder. Or will Anthony Yarde just blow him out in a couple rounds? We will see. I mean, given the fact he's only got 1 defeat, he might come out with a little bit of ambition. What do you guys think in the chat? And then Jamie TKV versus Franklin Ignatius. I think it's a good fight. You know, domestic level UK fight. Kind of a your call type fight, right? Any of you who've ever been to a boxing show at the your call, these are the level of fights. I mean, you get fights of all levels at your call, but generally you get fights of this type of level there. And some of them can be fantastic to watch, particularly heavyweights. So, you know, I'm not one of these people who only watches the high level world champions and all this type of stuff. No, there is entertainment to be had at all levels in boxing, particularly with heavyweights. Yeah, you'll see some tremendous domestic level, area level, heavyweight scraps at places like Your Call and other small hall venues around the UK. Shout out to Mr. Merkel for the super chat. And I appreciate your comment there. Let's get the donation train running to show some appreciation for Hatman's regular live streams. Keep them coming, bro. Big respect. Shout out to you, sir. Yes, I muted myself earlier as I was putting the graphics up because I wasn't going to do any talking. I was just needing to sort the graphics out for people who are wondering. I think I did say before, I said, wait a second while I put these graphics up because I don't want to just be breathing down your ear roll. You know, like this when I'm putting the graphics up. Like some kind of prank caller back in the days. Do people still make prank calls? When I was a kid, prank calls were a thing. In fact, one of the funniest things I ever saw regarding prank calls was Eminem back in the days. I remember when he was on the Tim Westwood show. This is when Westwood was still with the BBC. And Eminem was in the UK, and they played a bunch of prank calls that Eminem had played. I think in America mostly, but there might have been some prank calls he did in the UK as well. I think there was. And these prank calls were hilarious. I swear down, they were hilarious. Black Dynamite says, what's the deal with Hassan Azim? Is he any better than Adam Azim? I think he's already lost, hasn't he? I think he might have lost. I think he lost fairly early on in his career. Kind of like Carol Atalma, you know, the brother of Moses Atalma. He already lost quite early on in his career. Oh, Black Dynamite is correct to me. He said, no, he's undefeated still. Okay. For some reason, I thought he'd lost. Music Narrator says, Hatman, I asked once already. I donated £2, but it ain't showing on the screen. Been subbed ages, but I'm new to these streams. Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask YouTube maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen any donation come up here from you, sir. Again, any super chats should come up on the screen. So if they're not up on the screen, I don't know. Maybe it's a YouTube issue. Oh, Deacon says he has lost. I watched it. Let me get his BoxRec page up now. Let me get his BoxRec page up. Let's have a look here. Hassan Azim. And for members of my Patreon who are wondering about the Donald video, it's very, very close now. I'll give you an update tomorrow, but it's very close now. I've done all the principal recording. I'm now editing in the bits and pieces of other people's videos on that situation. And we're very close now. Possibly this weekend, but I don't want to make any promises I can't keep. If it ain't out this weekend, I'll do another episode this weekend about other subjects. Maybe a sit rep episode. But it's very close, and I will give you an update tomorrow. Like a video update. So you can see where I'm at with it. Anyway, Hassan Azim, I've got his BoxRec page up here. It says he's 7-0. That is interesting, because somebody there in the chat said that they saw him lose. And for some reason, I had the impression that he'd lost already. Are we getting mixed up with another guy? Or is this some type of like weird Mandela effect going on here? Is this Mandela effect? Or have we just got him confused with somebody else? Charles B says, I swear he lost too. I could have sworn he'd lost. But yeah, on BoxRec, it says nothing. So let me look on YouTube now. Hassan Azim lost. Because I could have sworn this guy had lost. And and since that time, you really haven't heard any talk about him. Because they used to talk about Hassan Azim a lot when him and his brother first turned pro. But since that phantom loss, they haven't talked about him again. So if he hasn't lost, then why are they not talking about him anymore? could have sworn he lost. Or maybe not. I don't know. Either it's Mandela effect or we are confusing him with a different fighter. G-Man says, could the loss have been an unlicensed fight? I doubt it. And there's other people in the chat saying they swear they've seen him lose as well. Todd Francis says, Azim, no losses. Yeah, we are talking about Hassan Azim, not Adam Azim, but yeah, it still says on Hassan Azim's BoxRec page, no losses. So I don't know what's going on there. Maybe there's another guy called Hassan Azim who looks similar to him that lost. How random would that be? The Devin Haney effect. Yes, Mark Humby, the Devin Haney effect. You could have swore he lost, but he never actually did. I mean, I know Carola Talma lost. In fact, I should double check Carola Talma's BoxRec page now. Let's not get a Mandela effect on Carola Talma as well. Let me have a look at Carola Talma here. Carol Talma, yeah, he at least does have a loss on his record. Knockout loss back, it was only last year. He was stopped. That was on the Beterbiev Yard undercard, actually. And his brother Moses fought on that card as well. Tommy Fletcher also fought on the card. So Tommy Fletcher, I didn't see the fight, but somebody in the chat said he lost tonight. And Tommy Fletcher was being highly touted by his trainer, Mark Tibbs. Mark Tibbs, I remember a couple years ago, was saying that Tommy Fletcher is the hardest puncher he's ever worked with. Bear in mind, Mark Tibbs has worked with Dylan White, Johnny Fisher. He might have made those comments before he started working with Daniel Dubois because he was briefly with Dubois. But he'd worked with a number of heavyweights, obviously. And he was saying Tommy Fletcher, who is a cruiserweight, was the hardest puncher he'd ever worked with. Make it out what you will. But yeah, it appears, well, no, it doesn't appear, it's true. Tommy Fletcher lost today on points to a guy called Milans Volkovs. I think that's how you pronounce the name. Looking at him here, a Latvian, the big bad wolf, 11-3, 11-3-2. So this is a guy who really Tommy Fletcher should have been beaten if he's going to go anywhere. Yeah, the guy's lost several times, been knocked out before. Actually lost earlier on this year. The guy who just beat Tommy Fletcher, his last fight was a loss. Then he goes to, and he was also in the York Hall. So he returns to the same venue and beats Tommy Fletcher. Interesting. Black Dynamite says Prince Patel fighting in Ghana next week for an African belt. Who else has done that from the UK? Yeah, Prince Patel fights in Africa a lot. Charles B says he can remember Hassan Azim being interviewed after the loss and everything. It's a weird one, isn't it? Because there's loads of people, it's not just me, loads of people in the chat who swear they saw Hassan Azim lose. But yet BoxRec says he never lost the fight. Anonymous says, I can't believe he's suing. I don't think that's good for boxing. Who are you referring to when you say that I can't believe he's suing? Oh, of course, yeah, Haney. Haney's suing. I mean, I think that it is a bit weird the way that Devin Haney didn't actually do anything wrong in the fight with Garcia. But yet he's getting all the blame and Garcia's getting off scot-free when he failed a test. That is kind of off. But, yeah, Haney's suing is a bit weird. But maybe because of the way the public have turned on Haney instead of turning on Garcia, that has like amplified, you know, has amplified his level of upset. So he's doing something as weird as suing, you know, Ryan Garcia. Because Haney has been coming off like a bit of a Karen. But, you know, that aside, he is the innocent party in all this. You know, it was Ryan Garcia who had something he shouldn't have in his system. Casa says Haney just needs to move on with his career. I agree. Rayman says Bricktop will sue you if you died and have 2 fights left on your contract. That reminds me of that meme. You know that meme where it's like a skeleton in a coffin and the caption says, your boss is asking you, can you still come into work? Something like that. Ocean Blue says, Boatsy is some kind of Ghanaian prince. Yeah, I heard that said in the interview with Dan Aziz, the one he did with Spencer Oliver and the Gad. He said that Joshua Boatsy is some kind of prince in Ghana. If he is a prince in Ghana, why is he boxing? You know, strange sport for a prince to do. And why did he grow up in Croydon? Maybe he's one of those, like, I don't know his family. I don't want to say anything out of line here. But, you know, powerful men in many parts of the world, but certainly in Africa, powerful businessmen, royals, they tend to have loads of kids. And I mean loads of kids, dozens of kids. In many cases, they've got loads of wives. And in the countries that don't permit polygamy, and many countries in Africa do permit polygamy, but in the ones that don't, the businessman, the royal, whatever, instead of loads of wives, will just have loads of whatever, girlfriends and countless kids. So is that the case with Joshua Boatsy? I don't know. Because normally the way it works is only kids by, let's say, an African king's senior wife can inherit a royal title. The others that are not with his senior wife, they can't. I mean, it might work. Africa's a continent, right? There are many different cultures within Africa, but that's my very general understanding of it. Okay, Ali says, I grew up with a Nigerian prince, and I'm from South London, Stockwell. But also, how many of these guys can just say that they're a prince when they're actually not a prince? How do you verify if somebody's actually an African prince? Because Martin Bacoli is also supposed to be some type of prince, right? How do you verify that? People can say anything. Black Dynamite says, in Arab's country, the king's brother takes over from him. It's strange. Ocean Blue says, he took Aziz to Ghana. He said he was a prince. I don't know, man. I mean, maybe he is, but what kind of prince? It's like, for example, the Saudi royal family is enormous. There's something like 15,000 members of the Saudi royal family. Okay? Now, when they say that somebody is a Saudi prince, that is a bit different to the way princes are categorized or defined in the West. Generally, as I understand it, in Western royal houses, a prince is somebody who is a child of the monarch. If you're not a child of the monarch, I don't think you're a prince, are you? You might be, if you're like a cousin of the monarch, you might be a duke or an earl or something else. But in order to be a prince or princess, you have to be a child of the monarch. Whereas in Saudi Arabia and in many Arab countries, you don't have to be a child of the monarch to be called a prince. And so it might work that way as well in Ghana. Yeah, in Ghana, it might be like that, where you don't need to be actually the child of a monarch to be called a prince. You might just need to be related somehow to the monarch and they call you a prince. Black Dynamite says he's a prince in the same way Eubank Sr. is a sheriff. So not a prince at all then. Yeah, in Saudi, they've got 15,000, somewhere in the region of 15,000 members of the royal family. Isn't that crazy? 15,000. I mean, that's not a family anymore, is it? It's a tribe. It's 15,000 members. Pro Cala says, Hatman, do you think Corey Sanders was underrated? I don't know whether he was underrated, but he underachieved, I would say. I think he didn't really take his talent as far as it could have gone. Son of Abraham says it's because they all inbreed. What is because they all inbreed? The reason that there's so many of them? Well, the European royals inbreed as well. But there's nowhere near as many European royals as there is Saudi royals, right? Now, the European royals have been marrying their cousins and all that kind of stuff for centuries too, but there's nowhere near as many of them as there is Saudi royals. But obviously, in one of the things, obviously, is in Islam, a man can have up to 4 wives. So when you're allowed to have up to 4 wives, you can accelerate the breeding, right? Whereas with European royals, officially they're only allowed 1 wife. I know many of them, certainly back in the days, had a lot of illegitimate kids here, there, and everywhere. But again, they weren't called princes, were they? They were maybe given some type of noble title, but they'd never get the title of prince if they were illegitimate. Shout out to KO Boxing Vibe for the super chat. Very much appreciated. He said, what's your thoughts, Hatman, on the landscape of the heavyweight division once the likes of Usyk, Fury, Wilder, AJ retire? Even Zhang and Joyce are 39. My thoughts. I hope that this new generation coming through, Dubois, Italma, Jalalov, possibly Richard Torres, Fabio Wardley, and several others, even Martin Bacoli, even though he's in his early 30s now, he'll really be part of the next generation. I hope that they can create rivalries that the public are interested in, because ultimately that will, that will determine how healthy the heavyweight division is the rivalries. And also, when you have a monolithic champion in boxing, in any division, that actually hurts the division more than helps it. Unless you've got a phenom who is unbelievably exciting, like let's say a Mike Tyson, then having a monolithic champion, if you look through boxing historically, tends to cause fans to be turned off. Yeah, you tend to go into a bit of a slump when you've got a monolithic champion. Among the next generation of heavyweights, as it stands right now, I don't currently see a monolithic champion among them. If there was one, if one was to emerge, it might be Jalalov. But, if it's not him, then I think it should be a competitive era that we're about to move into. The personalities might not be there in terms of, comparing them to the Tyson Furies and Deontay Wilders of the world, Dylan White, Derek Chisora, all these guys who were part of the mix. The new generation, they don't really seem to have characters like that. When Tyson Fury was on the come up, he was a character right away, immediately. When Derek Chisora was on the come up, he was a character immediately. When Dylan White, same thing, a big character. Whereas, the guys coming through at the moment, we don't really see any big characters. So that's what I think about the next generation. I think that Daniel Dubois, and I made a video about this actually. I may have spoken about it in a live stream. I did a video saying, what if Daniel Dubois wins against AJ? And I said that if Dubois beats AJ, it will be good for the new era of heavyweight boxing, because it then legitimizes the new generation of heavyweights. Yeah, it shows that they are not necessarily inferior to the previous generation. So that win there will help the next generation of heavyweights moving forward in terms of their credibility, because everyone saw Daniel Dubois, new generation, smash AJ to bits. So we'll see. What do you think? KO Boxing Vibe. Again, thank you for your super chat. What do you think about the next generation of heavyweights? What's your opinion on it? Yeah, Anant says, I feel Mayweather brainwashed a lot of people into believing that nobody other than monolithic undefeated champions are not worth much. Yeah, I agree. Mayweather did a lot of damage to the sport with his propaganda and nonsense. He definitely popularized the preservation of the O. I mean, obviously, many fighters and many promoters over the years have wanted to try and preserve fighters' unbeaten records, but Mayweather made it like the be-all and end-all. Rayman says, I work with someone that said they believe they can beat Joshua. Okay. Are they actually a boxer? Dr. Wu says, I'm surprised no one ever called out Mayweather for never attempting or achieving undisputed. Again, Mayweather was able to hoodwink a lot of people with his antics. And he basically convinced everyone the undisputed was not important and the only belt that mattered was the WBC. Because the WBC gave him carte blanche to do whatever he wanted to do. This is why he favored the WBC, because as we've seen with so many WBC champions over the years, they just give them carte blanche to do whatever they want. They let some of their champions stay inactive for years and don't strip them. This is why Mayweather didn't want undisputed, because the other sanctioning bodies would impose mandatories on him. And he didn't like that. He didn't like being told, he didn't like being dictated to as far as who he had to fight. He wanted to be able to pick the styles that would suit him at particular times. So that's why he didn't want to keep hold of all those belts. Jupiter Sting says Mayweather was also as good out of the ring as he was inside it. Pure tactician. Fury wanted to be like that. Indeed. Absolutely bang on. David Haye tried that a little bit at heavyweight. At cruiserweight, he was on smoke. But at heavyweight, David Haye was trying to copy Mayweather's methods in terms of managing his career. We be crooks. Yup, as James Toney famously said in that Jonathan Ross television special for the Eubank Benn rematch. That was on ITV, I think. And they had James Toney via video link. And he was with Mickey Rourke, which was a random one. I know Mickey Rourke likes boxing and he had some little fake boxing matches himself. But he was there with James Toney. And James Toney started talking trash to Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn. And Eubank got really upset about it. Any of you who've never seen that, that is absolutely must-watch TV. KO Boxing Vibe says, good talent coming through, but I think it will take some time before the casual fans get really interested in the new generation. AJ Fury and Wilder fans are going to feel lost for a bit. Yeah, there needs to be rivalries there. I mean, ultimately, the most important thing is exciting fights. Even if the heavyweights have no personalities at all, if we're getting exciting fights on a regular basis, people will tune in. But it also helps a lot to have big personalities, beef, and all this type of stuff. Really helps in boxing. Shout out to Bradley for the super chat. He said at least Mayweather had plenty of good names on his resume. Fury wanted the easiest route possible. I agree with that. And I agree with what Spark said there. Fury was the poor man's version of Mayweather. Yeah, Mayweather did fight very good fighters. There's no doubt he did. But he picked and chose which good fighters he fought and when he fought them. Yeah, Mayweather's resume is on a completely different level to Tyson Fury, for sure. No doubt. And Mayweather was a very, very good fighter. I'm never going to sit here and tell you that Mayweather was rubbish. No, Mayweather was a fantastic fighter, but he was somewhat deceptive. Sosa says, I found David Haye so interesting when I was younger. I remember how he hoodwinked us fighting on Dave TV. Yeah, that was crazy. Against Arnold Jurjai and Mark Damori, the guy who learned to box from YouTube. Crazy. Jupiter Sting, I agree. Atama has a very pleasing and natural way of fighting. He does. He's been doing it for a long time. You know, he's been boxing since he was a young kid. But yeah, he does have a very natural way of moving. LJR24 says, Hatman, love the bow review. Can tell you still miss the 90s by your reactions. Yeah, I'm glad you guys enjoyed, the Patreon crew enjoyed the Riddick Bowe career review. I enjoyed doing it. It's like a trip down memory lane. It was actually nearly 3 hours long, that Riddick Bowe career review, where I'm showing footage from any of Riddick Bowe's fights and talking about the backstory behind the fights and all that. Nearly 3 hours long, but it didn't feel like 3 hours recording it. That's when you know you're enjoying something, when time flies. The Joker says, Itama has insane physical strength at his age. Seen some videos of him benching 170 kilos and squatting 220. Jesus, at 19. Benching 170 kilos. Now that is strong. Damn. That is a lot of weight. Now, those vids are on my Patreon page. The Riddick Bowe career reviews on my Patreon page. Shout out to Leo O'Brien. Said, big up Hatman right now. Would you want to see Yard Boatsi? Yes. Now's the time to make it. Now's the time to make it. They're both with Ben Shalom, boxer. So do the fight. I think it's now or never, really, for that fight. Because we know that, we think at least, Beterbiev and Bivol are going to rematch. Possibly minus one belt, but I think that's the IBF. And to my knowledge, Boatsi isn't IBF mandatory, is he? He's mandatory with, is it the dub? In fact, let me double check here. Which organization Boatsi is mandatory with? Where are we at here? Joshua Boatsi. Okay, now Boatsi is interim. So that's a slight step higher than mandatory with a WBO. So yeah, they can't really make, and the reason I bring this up is because they can't really make Boatsi versus Yard for the vacant IBF. If indeed Artur Beterbiev gets stripped to that belt. Because it's looking like this Michael Eifert guy will either be made champion or get to fight somebody for the vacant. Though that's the talk at the moment. So yeah, Yard Boatsi will be a non-title fight, but a big fight in the UK. As far as I'm concerned, it's now or never. And I don't see why they wouldn't do it now. As long as Yard can do it contractually, because Frank Warren is still acting like he's got some type of contractual hold over Anthony Yard, even though he's fighting on a boxer card tomorrow. I don't know how that all works. Something to do with matching rights. But yeah, that's kind of thrown me off when somebody said that Itama can bench 170 kilos. 170 kilos. Now look, you know, being able to bench press a lot, that's not the be all and end all in boxing. Or else all these bodybuilders and powerlifters and whatever will be world heavyweight champions. So it's not the be all and end all, obviously. But we know Itama can fight. We know he's got, you know, he's fluid, he moves well and so on. Nice style. Combined with all that, he's benching 170 kg? That's crazy. KO Boxing Vibe says, why does Yard keep fighting security guards from Tesco then jumping up to fight elite fighters? It's the strangest thing. I can only imagine he's being advised by Tunde Ajayi, his manager, to do so. Son of Abraham says, bench press is actually a dysfunctional exercise. Please elaborate. What do you mean by that? I don't do weights myself, but you say it's a dysfunctional exercise. Please elaborate. Black Dynamite and Jarrell Miller. Excuse me. Black Dynamite says Jarrell Miller and Dylan White can probably bench 172. Yeah, I know both of those guys do a lot of weight training. Son of Abraham says it's an unnatural way of moving. Is it? Is bench press an unnatural way of moving? I don't know about that. How is it unnatural? What, pushing your arms out in front of you? Again, we're talking about, again, pushing is natural. Like pulling, as Black Dynamite says, it's like doing a push-up. And when you're boxing, of course, your arms are pushing out in front of you. Now, one thing I will say is, just because you can bench a lot, it doesn't mean you can punch hard. That one I can absolutely guarantee you. Yeah? Just because you can bench a lot, it don't mean you can punch hard. Because it's about, you know, punching, getting power in a punch is about the kinetic chain, right? Moving your body weight from your foot, through your leg, up through your waist, hips, so on, to the end of your fist with the correct timing to maximize the velocity and the power transfer during a point of impact. So that is a very different thing to lifting a static weight. Yeah, so just because somebody can bench a lot, it doesn't necessarily mean they can punch hard. In fact, there are plenty of people who can bench a hell of a lot and they don't punch hard. But then again, there are some people who bench a lot and punch tremendously hard. What I will say is, if you've already got the technique and the kinetic chain and all that goes with it to punch hard, bench pressing might help to improve, might help to increase your power a bit. But you have to have the kinetic chain, you have to have the technique to punch hard in the first place. It's not going to turn somebody who's not a puncher into a big puncher just because you start benching a lot. No. Technique is the most important thing when it comes to punching power. So Son of Abraham says, but when you bench press, you keep your scapula retracted, and it really is not conducive for good punching mechanics, nor no good mechanics for life in general. Again, I'm not a weightlifting guy, so I don't really have a strong view on that one way or the other. But as I've already said, technique, as in boxing technique, punching technique is the most important thing. But I don't know, I'm not a weightlifting guy, but I do suspect that if you already can punch hard and you already have the technique, bench press can help you to enhance it. Obviously, it depends on how much bench press you're doing, how much weight you're putting on, so on and so forth. And also, bench press would likely help you more with straight punches rather than hooks, is what I'll say. Son of Abraham says, if you think about it, the only time in actual life you do anything like bench press is if you're standing up against the wall and pushing something while also pushing your back against the wall. In many manual labor jobs, you'll be pushing stuff. Particularly in poorer countries where they don't have machinery for everything. They'll be pushing a lot of heavy stuff around. And either way, boxing has loads of movements that you wouldn't normally do, right? Boxing has loads of quote unquote unnatural movements, but it is what it is. Jupiter Sting says, good book on weights for striking they recommend. Literally throwing a dumbbell across the pitch like a shot put. Yeah, that's the explosive movement. Jackie Boy Johnson says, Hatman, what do you think about a German managing the England football team? I don't think much about it. I'm not really a big football guy. But, I mean, Sven, they've had foreigners managed England before, right? So, what's the big issue? Is it just because it's a German and there's the historic rivalry between Germany and England? Is that why it's controversial? I don't know. Wouldn't really bother me. It's whatever, innit? Sven Goran Eriksson managed England. Shiv says, I feel the power in your punches comes a lot from the back muscles rather than the pushing ones. Well, bench press is very reliant on back muscles. Rows, pull-ups, etc. will probably increase power more than bench. I would disagree with that. Again, I'm not a weights guy, but I can punch very hard. And anybody who thinks I'm talking BS, there's a video of me hitting the bag. Some of you guys may have seen it on the Patreon. And I can punch hard and fast. It is a 10-year-old video when I was a much younger man. But I know something about punching power because I can actually punch very hard myself. So I feel like I can speak on it and how to hit hard and what the mechanics of power punching are from first-hand experience. And really, it's about getting various, it's all about the kinetic chain. Okay, so it starts with your foot, it goes through your legs, your hips, your back, and then eventually it's about the timing and the distance, getting the correct biting point for your punch when it lands. So throwing the punch from the right distance, having your balance right in the first place, having your knees bent. If you lean into the shot with your back, I mean, there are so many little refinements that you can make to increase your punching power. And I always recommend shadow boxing. Shadow boxing did so much for increasing my punching power when I was boxing. as an amateur. People might think, how does that make sense? Because with shadow boxing, you're punching through, not the kind of typical shadow boxing you see people do where they're just snatching punches. I'm talking about shadow boxing where you're punching through the target. All right, when you're imagining the target in front of you and you're punching through the target every time, you're getting the full range of motion with all your punches, and you're getting snap on all the punches that you're throwing. If you do loads of shadow boxing, I'm talking about 12 rounds of shadow boxing on a regular basis, punching through the target, shots coming out explosive, getting your balance right, getting your knees bent, getting the rotation, getting on the ball of your back foot if you're an orthodox fighter, throwing a straight right hand. When the straight right hand goes out, you get on the ball of the back foot and rotate into the shot. Yeah? When you do that consistently, shadow boxing like that, I'm telling you, next time you go in the bag, you're going to be like, wow, I'm hitting so much harder. Because you're getting your punch mechanics and muscle memory to deliver the punch with better technique. So you've got better power transfer. You're really refining your kinetic chain when you do all that shadow boxing. So I definitely recommend shadow boxing for improving punching power. I also recommend using heavy bags that don't move. So the biggest heavy bag you can find, and if you don't have a heavy bag, there's a wall pad, wall target, whatever they call them. Those are very good for developing power in the hooks and uppercuts because they don't move. Yeah? So I recommend those. If you train a few weeks on those wall pads, hitting it as hard as you can with hooks and uppercuts, and then go back to hitting heavy bags after that, you will notice very quickly an increase in punching power. A Jupiter's string says the wall pad is humbling. It is indeed. Because when you're hitting the bag and it's flying all over the place, you think you're Mike Tyson. Then you hit the wall pad, it don't go anywhere. And you get tired a lot more quickly when you hit the wall pad as well. You get tired way more quickly. Black Dynamite says, Hatman, how do you improve punching power in short arm punches, the ones with very little tell on them? Well, if you look at guys like Artur Beterbiev and Gennady Golovkin, they do a lot of wrist exercises. Yeah, a lot of push-ups and a lot of wrist exercises. And I think that helps with those kind of really short punches. But obviously, there needs to be motion somewhere in your body if you want to get maximum power. But you can disguise the motion mostly in your legs and hips. Okay, so if you have your arm out, not all the way obviously, still relatively close to your head. If you have your hand out a little bit and you twitch from the legs and the waist and have a relaxed right shoulder, you can make it so there's very little tell on the right hand. I'm not sure if you can visualize what I'm saying here. Jackie Boy Johnson says, how can you improve your chin then? You really can't improve your chin much. In my observations over the years, your chin is your chin. Now, if you're someone who's never boxed before, or you're someone that hasn't boxed for a long time, and you get back into it, and you find that you're not taking the punches very well, you might start to take the punches better when you get used to it again. But once you get used to it, that is your chin. Whatever it is, and I'm talking about adults now. Obviously, if you're a teenager, you may not have as good a chin then as when you're 25, right? But from when you're an adult, whatever your chin is, that's your chin. Jackie Boy Johnson says neck exercises. I don't think neck exercises make that much of a difference in terms of punch resistance, personally. Neck exercises are obviously very popular in boxing, but I've seen so many fighters with massive necks and they can't take any punch, they can't take a shot. Andre Bertel's got a big neck. No chin. There was Michael Moorer. He had a massive neck. He had like a neck as big as Mike Tyson at one point, Michael Moorer. Trained his neck up and he had no chin. Herbie Hyde at one point in his career, later on when he started doing weights, not when he fought Riddick Bowe, after that, he tried to train himself up and get a big neck, and he did get a big neck at one point. Was still getting chinned. Still couldn't take a shot. So I don't think neck strength will help that much. It might help a tiny bit, but all right, peeps, I'm going to turn this one in here. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me on this live stream. And a special thanks to all the people who donated via Super Chat. Take care, be good, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. I'm out.